All right. My name is Melissa Waters, and I'm the events manager at JMT Consulting. And we are excited to have you join us for one of our first webinars of the year 2021. I want to go through a few housekeeping notes, and then I will turn it over to Andy Harleman. He is our director of sales and our facilitator today. First, we are recording this webinar, so we will share a copy of the recording as well as the slides with you. Also, if you have any questions at all during the presentation, please ensure that you submit them through the Q&A box at the bottom of your control panel. We will answer those at the end. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy. And as we talked about in the lead up to this event here, we have an esteemed panel, and we're going to go through and just have a conversation today about working with a partner like JMT, when you do an implementation project of any kind of software. So before we get started with our panel, I want to briefly make sure that everyone understands who JMT is, what our background is, so that you understand where we're coming from in this perspective. So should be able to see that screen, nods from my panel, everything's good. Okay, so first and foremost, JMT is not a software publisher. We are an independent firm. We work only with the nonprofit sector, and we help implement tools like accounting and ERP, and other tools like that. We work with our clients. Our commitment is to you, the client, not to the software publisher itself. And so we were founded with the idea of helping nonprofits with that very specific thing. And so the whole idea is software is a tool, but you need to really set it up properly. You need to have the right onboarding. You need to have the right partner to help you with that. And that's our mission. And you can see here one of our esteemed clients in the New York area says great things about us. I think he kind of verifies everything I just said there, that the onboarding process with the software is what really mattered to him when he worked with us to help implement his financial and ERP solution. Our whole approach to this is the idea, as you can see here, that you have to crawl before you walk, before you run, and before eventually you fly. And in some ways, we are going to differentiate ourselves from others who perhaps make it seem like, hey, in 5 minutes, you're going to be up and running, and everything is going to be hunky-dory. No, we understand there is a learning curve. Everybody has to, no matter how great the technology, you have to have some period of time to be able to crawl, walk, run, and then fly. So what we help you do at JMT is just that. We're not here to just get you to sign off on the dotted line and buy some software and that be the end of it. We're here to help you, not just today, not just tomorrow, not just when you go live on your software, but even years from now, when configuration decisions you made in the beginning, maybe you've changed and you need to look at another way of doing it. So our process, I'm not going to read you all the little bullet points on the screen, but this is really what we're all about here, is helping people through the process of implementing their tools by following the steps you see here. We put a lot of care and thought into each one of these steps. And you will see as we talk about it today, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the details behind these. And then a big part of that, of course, is the education and the training. It's, these software tools that are out there now are very, very powerful, but with great power comes responsibility and comes the need to learn more. And so JMT believes very strongly in educating our clients, because we want each one of our clients to be proficient. And we don't want them to have to call us every time they need something. We don't want them to have to email somebody every time they need something. We're here to help if you do. But the idea is we want to empower you to be able to do all these things and take advantage of the software. So our decision on what software we work with in the first place has a lot to do with the ability for people to be able to learn and understand it and for it to be usable. But education is key. No matter how usable a piece of software is, you've got to have the right education behind it. So that's a big part of what we do. And our philosophy is based on a team approach here at JMT. We have different people that do different pieces of the implementation. One of our panelists today, for example, heads up the training part of our JMT team when it comes to these implementations. But that whole approach is making sure we're covering all the bases and all the different parts of an implementation, and then support thereafter that have to do with leveraging these software tools. So I leave you from the introduction, I'll leave you with just another nice quote that one of our clients used to talk about the fact that, our expertise and our understanding of the nonprofit world really informed our decisions about helping him do his setup. And that, in his words, that's exactly what you want in a consulting group that you're working with. So that's who JMT is. And now I'm going to introduce our panel. So let me stop my share here and go back to the video. There we go. So I'm going to go, I don't know how it's appearing to you, but to my left is Jacki Tiso. Jacki is the founder and the CEO of JMT Consulting. So those are her initials, Jacqueline M. Tiso. So Jacki founded JMT and still heads it up as the CEO of the organization. Below me, anyway, I don't know how it looks on your screen, I have Dougie Stanton. Dougie is the manager of the education piece, as I said, of our implementations here at JMT when we work with new clients. And then we have Mark Brazier, who Mark used to be a client of JMT's. In fact, he was a client of JMT's on 2 different software applications, and then had the opportunity, and he came and started to work with us. So Mark is now in the role of what we call sales engineer. Mark's the guy that helps clients to see the new products by running the demonstration pieces and showing them basically the demo when you get into looking at potential replacements for what you're currently using. And then finally, we have a happy JMT client herself, Jolie Boo from Samaritan House in San Mateo, California, and she is the CFO and has been working with JMT now, I don't know, Jolie, what, 5 years maybe? 5, 6 years, something like that. So this is the panel that we have today, and I wanted to start where it all began with Jacki, the founder of JMT. And so Jacki, let me scroll and make sure I've got my cheat sheet here, but I know tomorrow, to the day, tomorrow is the 30th anniversary of JMT. So first off, I want to say thank you and congratulations for 3 decades of helping nonprofits with these kinds of things. So
thank you.
Congrats to you for that. But I always talk about, when I meet prospective clients, I always talk about some of the stuff you've shared about your experience, because prior to founding JMT, you worked at several different nonprofit organizations as a finance person. And in fact, I remember I had worked here for maybe a year or 2 before I learned that you had been a buyer yourself. You had been through implementations on the buyer side of the house. How many times?
4.
4 times. So I remember one particular staff meeting when you got up and were speaking to the group and you talked about that. I think that was when I learned it, because I hadn't been here all that long. And I remember you had some pretty strong words to describe your feelings about some of those implementations, and you weren't, let's say you weren't all that impressed. So
No.
I know in some ways that was part of the motivation to you to go out and start your own company 30 years ago tomorrow. So I just want to tell us about how you felt as a buyer about those engagements, and how perhaps that influences even to this day what you believe and what you do here at JMT.
Well, it is definitely still a major influencer, and as all the team know, my constant question is, how is our client really feeling about this? Or I will say to our team, I was a CFO and I lived through this, so let's think about this a little bit differently. Yeah, my experiences were unfortunately 4 different organizations, 4 implementations weren't good. The first one was the first time I was ever in charge of implementing a project, a software, and of course that was the hardest and worst of the bunch. I learned a little bit as I went with each one. But I think the key things that came out of it for me, and that, I said, oh, this is really bad, there's got to be a better way. And that's how JMT, got started, was I started doing consulting for evaluating and helping organizations through that process, and then project managing the process, because I had, you don't know what questions to ask, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so in all 4 cases, I got a scope of work, and I had one image of what I was getting, an understanding of what I was getting. And then the software publisher in one case and consultants in the other 3 cases, well, they had a different definition of what I was getting than I thought I was getting. So, I really came out of it thinking to myself, understanding nonprofits is really huge. Understanding what the scope of the work is so important. And then, the pricing on it, we had a budget, our board approved a certain dollar amount. I couldn't be looking at change orders, and I had change orders because I wasn't getting what I thought I was getting. And, they were sitting there saying, well, this is what we said in the language. And, if you want that, you got to pay more. So out of all of that pain and buyer's remorse, JMT sort of rose from the ashes.
And here we are 30 years later.
Here we are 30 years later.
Wow. So I want to move on now to Mark from our team. So Mark, as I mentioned, was a client of JMT's. He was on what we call a more legacy tool before. I think it was an on-premise situation. And then he migrated, and he and his team worked with us to implement Intact. And in fact, he worked with Dougie, who I will bring up here in a minute with a question for her, when he implemented his system. So Mark, when you were, a client of JMT's, tell us what you think are the key values that you got from JMT as a client going through that implementation.
Well, I think first of all, you have to say competence. I think that's probably one of the questions that is asked. Can JMT do what the publisher did? And so first of all, we found that the team was very, very competent in what they were doing. But then the relationship that developed was the piece that really sold the issue. That allowed me to trust the people at JMT. I knew you, I knew Carol, I knew Dougie, who's on the call today, personally. And that made all the difference, because I began to develop a trust that, okay, what these people have told me verbally and what's on that scope of work that Jackie referred to, I can trust that, and they're going to take care of us to get us up and running. And so that competence is number one. You have to have that competence, and JMT can do that. But that relationship and trust, because they were able to give that to me as well. So,
well, I always say it's interesting, when we're working with a prospective client, and we might be partnering with a multi-billion-dollar software company, which is great software, and obviously you need that. You need backing and finance and technology behind it, but you can get lost in the shuffle when you're talking about a giant worldwide software company. And I think I heard you talk about a personal relationship there, Mark, and what you were saying there. It sounds like that aspect of working with an individual partner like JMT really meant something to you. Do you think, you talked about the personal angle on it, and how do you think that personal angle specifically helped? I mean, look, we all agree it's nice to know somebody and be able to say hello to them, but how did that help with the implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. So Carol and Dougie convinced me, first of all, that they cared that I succeeded, that they weren't there to collect our dollars and then say, well, you have what you have. And they convinced me. We were at a place in the organization I was at, we were stretched way too thin. And so therefore adding a implementation was a huge burden on us. And we fell behind in our office. We fell behind on doing what we needed to do, but they refused to let us die there. And I think if it had been a company or organization that didn't care about us and care that we succeeded and were just trying to collect a dollar and move on, we would have just died right there. And we would have had the old software, like you said, still on a server, and we would have had new software that we couldn't do anything with. And so they refused to let me die at that point and just stop where I was at. So that's where the relationship came in, because I still remember those calls from Carol, and probably I even avoided them for a while, and I would hear them on the voicemail. Mark, this is Carol. And I'm sure, and Jackie's laughing, I'm sure that people at JMT were saying, is Randall ever going to move on this thing? But Mark, this is Carol. I was checking in on you, see where you were. I need this document, or I need this. And they just refused to let us die at that point. And the organization is much better off today because of that, is able to move forward and do things. And so that's where the relationship came in. So
that's great. I'm glad to hear that. And so let's move on to you, Dougie. I know you had the pleasure of actually being the lead consultant on that job, but you've been a professional implementation consultant here at JMT. And then before that at a couple other different places. I knew you before you worked here at JMT, I know. But one of the things that we were just talking earlier before we went online about how technology's changed so much. And Jacki and I were talking about how we used to argue with people when we would tell them finance is going to be in the cloud someday. And anyway, so technology's changed a lot over the years. And I could ask you about things like how you've seen implementations change because of technology, but I'd rather ask you how you think things have stayed the same with no matter how much technology changes. What key things do you think are really still the same in implementations? Oh, you're muted, sorry.
I do the thing I always have my trainees not to do. Whoops. The thing that has the main factor that has not changed are people. People haven't changed. People are, it's amazing to me, they're scared of implementations. They're afraid of going through the process. It's to them, it's this big overwhelming, oh, I don't know, it's winter, snowball. That's coming at them and they don't know how to deal with it. And so one of the things we help them do is, it's one human to another. We help them we see the different side of things. We see the big picture and just help them break it down because yeah, it's all nonprofits, it's all organizations. To us, it's almost the same process, but everybody's different. And we have to recognize and help the people through the implementation. And we're there to help them. What really reassures them, and I think that's one of our many strengths, is a lot of us come from the nonprofit world. A lot of us have accounting backgrounds, if not degrees. We know the language that they're talking about. We can see it, and we've done it for so many people, and it just helps them feel comfortable. Mark, I hope you back me up on that, to reassure them that we'll be there. We're helping you through it. We're holding your proverbial hand through the process, and we're not going to let you sink. We're going to let you swim.
That's great. Well, thanks, Dougie. So let's move on to Jolie, give you a chance. So first off, as a client, and JMT's here, number one priority is to support the nonprofit sector. That's what we're all about. That's what we've always been all about. And so I want to start by just giving you the chance to tell us the mission of Samaritan House and what it does for the community, what it does for the people you serve, and what it does for you. You've chosen, like a lot of our clients, you've chosen to work in a nonprofit when perhaps you could find a job in a high-paying for-profit job somewhere else. But so tell us what you like about Samaritan House. Well, first, tell us the mission and just what you like about working there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me as well. So Samaritan House, basically, we promote, we preserve dignity, promote self-sufficiency, and provide hope to our community in need. So we're sort of an anti-poverty organization, multifaceted social services. We have a homeless shelter, 2 free medical clinics. We have a food pantry, dining room program. We distribute food for those who need it, as well as clothing, rental assistance, financial assistance, case management, crisis management for clients in need. And we're actually part of a 8-organization network in San Mateo County on the West Coast. That provides safety net services through county contracts and things. So we're sort of the go-to organization for people that find themselves in trouble, find themselves needing immediate assistance and safety net. So, and so you can see we have like 5 sites. And so a lot of our financial needs are very complex. So that's why I was very concerned when we were moving off QuickBooks, believe it or not, into Intact about 5 years ago, but I can get into that in a second. But my personal background is I've been in nonprofits for more than 35 years, actually almost close to 40 at this point. And the passion basically there is, nonprofits really need infrastructure. They need to have the expertise that the for-profit companies need in the nonprofit, so they can provide and do what they need to do. And that is really what draws me to nonprofit organizations, and specifically Samaritan House, because we do a lot of financial assistance and pass through funding, and we need to be able to account for that. We need to be steward of that, and help those around. So I enjoy nonprofits. I've always been in the nonprofit sector. I started out in the nonprofit sector as a business manager and just went from there. And so very, very happy.
That's great. I know that you know, one of the things you said in that statement reminded me a lot of something else Jacki said about the founding of JMT, which is like that nonprofits deserve all of the same great technology and things that the for-profit world has as well. So, but let me ask you about, it was interesting because we were talking about the topic for this panel, and the topic being, you know, why work with a partner instead of a publisher when it comes to implementing some of these great software tools. And Jacki reminded us that 5 years ago or so, you actually called us up and said, hey, listen, I've already pretty much chosen I want to go to Sage Intacct. At the time, I think it was just Intacct. And I'm going to be at the user conference in Florida, and I wanted to interview you. And so you flew all the way from San Mateo, California down to Orlando, Florida, and JMT and some others, I think you interviewed us. And what I find interesting about that is that you had already in your mind, even before you knew you were going to pick JMT, right? You just knew you were going to work with a partner and not directly with the publisher. So I want to see if you could take us back to that moment in time and tell us what drove that mindset, that very pro-partner mindset that you had there.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a whole software search, and we came down, we settled on Intacct. It was, for us, it was sort of a no-brainer. And then I was like, okay, so I was ready for my next step, is who's going to help us install this thing and implement it. And Intacct just assumed I was going to go with their partner that they have, that they assign everybody. And I'm like, well, they can put in a bid and I'll interview them, but you know, who else is out there? And I did a little bit more research. I was able to understand that everyone was going to be at the Intacct conference. And I said, oh, perfect opportunity. We're going there as a new client. We had no implementation ready yet. I go, well, then I'm going to find out who there is sort of the key players, right? And so it was perfect. And I interviewed their person that they partner with, which is a local firm here in California, and then also several firms over at the conference, and you guys were one of them. And so it was very, very interesting prospect. We needed something specific at Samaritan House. We have a very small staff. We don't have the expertise. All of our staff knows accounting. We have a great accounting staff, but they don't know how to implement a financial system, how to design it. You know, what are the decisions that have to be made at each point? And we didn't have the expertise on staff to be able to do that. So I wanted a implementer, and I knew our agency needed someone who was going to give us expert advice, who knew the software, who knew accounting issues of nonprofits and setups. And you know, we wanted the pros and cons of every decision that was going to be made going down the road, because that is, you know, it's so flexible. You can design things in a certain way, but what are the impacts of those, you know, and so I wanted that level of advice and advisory, and to take us through this thing, and also not just to set things up the way that we always had them, but talk us through the advantages and disadvantages of creating something new. You know, how could it be done? What's possible? And so I knew that we were going to have a large discovery hours that we were going to need. And when I was getting proposals with 20 hours for the entire process, and I'm like, oh no, that's not going to work. Because I knew what it was going to take for us to really sort of dig deep and understand what we were creating. You know, we were coming from a QuickBooks to, you know, Intacct. So I needed that level of care. And when I went out there and spoke with you all, I know I spoke with Andrew, and I think Jacki came by, and there was also Matt Spuck was another person who was within the organization who actually had a session that I attended. And he was a former CFO. And it was just like, it just clicked in that that's exactly what we needed. And we had a customized proposal from you guys that actually added additional discovery hours into that proposal. And that's what sold me, because I knew we needed that. And I was appreciative of you all learning what you were listening to me and learning what we needed. And when the proposal came in, it had those things in it versus the other ones that were sort of boilerplate, and you fill out the template, load it up, and tell us what you want, and we'll implement that. Well, we didn't know what we wanted, and so we needed that advice. And so that's what was very important for me. And even so, it's for us, the selection of the implementation, that was more important than even selecting of the software.
Wow. Now you're singing the kind of stuff that I know makes us all feel very good, because we really, every day we go to work believing that that is the case. As great as the software we choose to partner with is, we know that no software is worth its salt if you don't implement it correctly. So I know that's music to our ears to hear you say that, for sure. And so on that topic, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it was also the discovery, but it was also the training piece. There was a significant part in training that was happening with one-on-one, and that part also was extremely important to us because of getting our staff up and running. And none of the other folks had the training aspect. And I just want to, just one comment, and then I'll let you finish. I'm sorry. Is that when Mark mentioned the relationship, that was also, as the years went on, that was also the most important thing. I knew people, I got to know our connections, our support people, and being able to call up and ask by names and things like that really provided our staff with confidence that we could get any issue we had dealt with. So,
well, I can tell you this: everyone at JMT knows the name Julie. Everyone knows you, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients, but there's only one Julie. So definitely the relationship is there. But I want to, something you said, I know Jacki smiles when the stuff you say is just everything we believe in at our organization about what we want to help our clients feel. But Jacki, you saw me talk about a few minutes ago with the implementation methodology, which is largely, your creation over the years that we've been doing this. What do you think are the differences? I think Jolie mentioned a few, but I'll just ask you to mention them. The differences between what we do as a partner versus what a publisher might do when it comes to setting up a system.
Well, I absolutely think Jolie touched on them really phenomenally. I think the real differentiators, and they're just in the words themselves, right? A publisher, and often CPA firms, the partner, we're a partner and we're known as a partner, versus we're the publisher, or for example, a CPA firm who has a technology services arm. And, I really think this is like the biggest differentiator, because, if you just look at the definition of a partner, a partner is one that you are, working closely with, ongoing. And it's not, even just one-time project, oh, you're kind of live now. And, a partner, they also don't do sort of cookie cutter, here's our standard implementation or our standard structure and our standard pricing. A partner is looking at each partnership and saying, okay, this is our partner. What do we need to do here? What do we need to design? What's going to make our partners successful? And, I think it's all just wrapped up in that definition of what a partner is. And that's how we look at it. We're looking at it, and we talk about it, as a team all the time, is, we view it as our responsibility to look around the corner, right? We're supposed to be the experts. We're the experts. Let's look around the corner on our clients' behalf. Let's make the recommendations and help our clients to understand, here's why we're making the recommendation and what it will mean for your organization. And it's just that level of personalization that comes from a relationship. And, and it then goes onward after go live, and Mark spoke to it, a little bit about during go live. A partner supports each other. A partner doesn't throw it over the fence and say, okay, it's your turn now, you're on your own, or when you get this done, let us know. There's just so many aspects to it. And publishers are phenomenal. We work with great publishers, and they're the experts in developing the solution and the software and the functionality and the feature set and all that. But their mission, and I'm all about mission, their mission is not about being the #1 service oriented, firm. Their mission is about how do we make this the very best software it can. And so, that's the bottom line.
Well, if I may add, I know I'm supposed to be asking the questions, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of my own answer, which is when I think of the word partner, I think about that implies a long-term relationship. That's not just something you do, So we talk a lot, and we have been focused even in this call on implementing and a project. Like, hey, when you buy a new software, you do have to have a project to get live, and you do have to. But as we showed in that first slide, it goes far beyond just going to go live. And organizations change. Jolie was talking before we went live today about how the COVID crisis has affected Samaritan House greatly this year. And so organizations change, which sometimes means configurations decisions that you made in the past need to be tweaked as well. So I know that long-term relationship is important. And I want to ask Mark something here. Mark, so you've been now on the JMT side for a year, and having been a client and now working on this side of the house, in your role doing demonstrations and talking to prospective clients about how this software and how working with JMT might help them, how do you see that working with us is of particular value? But how do you think the way we do it comes across, or what are you seeing in how we talk to prospective clients that helps you to feel maybe connect the dots from what you felt as a client and versus what you're experiencing now working on JMT side?
I think the whole issue of relationship again and the partnership doesn't begin after the client has decided to partner with us. It begins in the sales process. And so we've created, and I'm on the sales side of things, and we've created what we call an alignment call and a demonstration to learn more about the client, to learn more about what they are doing, how they're doing it, what their needs are, that sort of thing. And then every week, even though I'm on the sales side, I meet every week with the implementers in meetings to make sure that we're handing that off well, to make sure we're communicating between the two. One of the biggest slams against anybody in the sales business, despite regardless of what industry you're in, is that salespeople promise the moon and then poor implementers have to figure out how to do it. We're making sure we don't do that. We're making sure those two sides of the house are talking to each other and making sure. So it starts with the relationship. You can't just start the relationship when you sign on the dotted line. You have to start earlier. And so then it comes down to you can be a number or a name. And as you've already stated with Jolie and different ones, we could go down the list. Any of us on the call could go down the list of clients that we have that we know by name and have even maintained connection to even sometimes on a personal basis. JMT is large enough to have the expertise to do what needs to be done, but we're small enough to maintain the relationships, and the partnerships are relationships. And really, partnerships, the business word, relationships is really where it's at. And that's what we're doing. And so we're working very hard on the inside to make sure that the relationship starts very early. And if you choose to continue with us, then that relationship continues. And as you said, it's a long-term thing, because as needs develop and as software develops, JMT is going to be, as Jackie mentioned, ahead of the curve to make sure that we know what's out there and make sure our clients are taken care of. So.
Well, it's interesting you were saying that, and I would the relationship part of it. And I know we talked earlier about the fact that Dougie is heads up our training aspect of our projects, so to speak. Dougie, and I'll flatter you a little bit. When I talk to clients who've worked with you, they always say, "I love Dougie." They always say they love Dougie. But Mark was talking about how things have changed, and I'm wondering, you know, we've all seen technology change rapidly in the last few years. I mean, I think back when I started at JMT, how different things are. I think back then everything was still a CD-ROM that you installed in a computer, right? So technology's changed a lot, and we talked earlier about what hasn't changed. But what kinds of things do you like to do to make sure that that we still keep our connectedness? Because I think all of us, you know, I know my kids think I'm an old codger because I get irritated that everything is on these phones now and people are standing around looking at their screens all the time. And in spite of technology, there is a disconnect that I think most of us would agree exists sometimes amongst us humans. So what are you doing, Dougie, on in the training side of JMT to make sure that we're leveraging that technology, but also not losing that connectedness?
So that really came home last year in the COVID world. Before COVID, we were big on in-person trainings. You know, we were on site, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be there in person. But because of COVID, we couldn't do that, but life went on. And so it's become fun and challenging to keep that connection via Zoom. You know, we primarily use Zoom. It's fun. What if the internet goes down? What do? Hotspots. How do you, and that's the beauty of Intact is we can do the proverbial big brother is watching. So one of our challenges has been, how do you make sure that people that are being trained are really doing what they do? Well, we have the audit trail in Intact, and we make it fun. You know, if you've been in my trainings, you know I hate being serious. How do people learn? They learn by having fun and doing silly things, because that's what sticks in. So it's been interesting to use new technology to our advantage. And the other interesting thing I found out is that, you know, with everybody working from home, well, for the most part, people tend to let their guards down. So you're in the middle of driving home a point and the dog starts barking, you know, or the cat walks across the screen. It's fun. And but people do tend to let their guards down from working from home, which has allowed us to get to know each other more personally, you know, talking about building the relationship. And they realize that we do understand what they're going through, and that connection helps tremendously in learning. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. I don't know what you're talking about people letting their guard down when they're working.
I'm just
well, I want to kind of wrap it up here with a final thing for Jolie. I want to talk about the fact that I'd mentioned a few minutes ago that we've been focused on things like implementing and that first step when you have a new tool to work with. But you also mentioned in your last response, you referenced the fact that over the years, something with JMT, and I certainly mentioned, you know, how things have changed even this year at Samaritan House, or 2020 at Samaritan House with the COVID crisis and all the other stuff that goes on. But no matter what goes on, even if there isn't a worldwide pandemic, every organization, for example, the way you design your chart of accounts today, you're naturally going to evolve slightly away from it, or maybe majorly away from it over time, and things are going to always change. You're going to add staff, the world's going to change around us. So talk to us a little bit about, Jolie. I know over the years you've worked with JMT, and not just to go live and that was the end of it, right? You've been a partner with JMT now for 5-6 years. Tell us about how that may have affected you, or the kinds of things that you work with your partner on.
I think, again, you know, as having a small accounting staff, we have 5 of us, and you know, JMT has been such a resource for us when anything has happened, and so we have, you know, support with JMT. We also have support directly with Intact, so we have both, but JMT is our primary support. And it has in the past just been just monumental. We had an issue a couple of years ago, I don't know, 3 years ago, a big issue. Somehow something changed, dates changed in our system that sent our reports out. We don't know, something Intact did itself. And it was really sort of traumatic for us. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I, you know, call you guys, and I think it was Carol, the one who actually ended up on the phone, and and Jeff, and they worked so hard. And Carol's calling me at 8 o'clock at night. What's it look like now? And, it's just, it was so helpful and so comforting and supportive to know that we had someone working on this for us outside of the Intact folks. And they were sort of, JMT was advocating for us with Intact. It was just super helpful. Within I think it was like 24 hours, our issue was solved and everything restored. But without that, we would have been kind of hanging. And I think we would have waited, 3 or 4 days for Intact to get back to us, et cetera. But just having that support was just instrumental for us. And as I said, I think I talked earlier about, we're in the middle of 3 other software selection processes now. And I told my staff, I said, with all of this going on, I said, we need to, who's going to be able to create a relationship like we do with JMT and Intact? I mean, because that's the type of support that helps us with implementations, with executions, with any kind of support. There's nothing worse than not having a system in place that you cannot, be able to pick up the phone and get support with, especially with smaller staffs. And so those are some of the things that I want to emulate going forward with these other projects that we have. So, I'm super appreciative of your philosophy because it helps us.
Well, we appreciate that very much. And if I wish I could say that JMT had, partnered with every kind of possible software that might possibly affect every nonprofit out there so that we could be helping you with those other selections you're working on right now, but we're getting there. But really, thank you so much for joining us on this panel, everybody today, and for all of you who are watching and listening. We hope you've seen that. Look, we know it's a very big decision when you're looking at any kind of new technology change, and we don't sugarcoat it at JMT. We know that, especially something like accounting, no matter how great and smooth the process is, it's still big change for you, and change is always hard. An analogy I've used many times is changing software can be kind of like having construction done on your home while you're living in it. So, it's not fun to be sleeping on the couch with drywall dust around you and stuff like that, but you get through it, and you get through it with a good partner like JMT. And so we hope you've seen that what we want you to walk away with today is understanding that a partner is what takes the great world-class software that you've selected and really makes it happen. Because as I said before, you could choose the greatest software in the world, but if you don't set it up right or you don't know how to use it, then it's really not worth the money you paid for it. So that's where a partner like JMT comes in, and that's why we've been doing what we do and passionately helping nonprofits with these kinds of things for now, as of tomorrow, 30 years. So we thank everybody. Missy, are we going to do a Q&A? Is there any of that?
I do have a couple questions if you are up for the challenge.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So first of all, that was a great conversation. Thank you all. And I know that there's a lot to digest what we talked about, but Andy or anybody, what would you say the next steps are in the process of determining which path people take? Like they've learned a lot about how a partner can really be beneficial, but what would you say to make that leap? What would you do?
Well, I think, I have a feeling Jacki might have some opinions on that. But Jacki mentioned something earlier. She talked about the fact that, you really need to understand what your needs are and what you're solving for. In fact, I would recommend before you call even a partner, or certainly before you call a publisher, I would recommend that you have at least an informally scripted little list of what you're really trying to do here. Why are you deciding you want to change software or something like that? And documenting and understanding for yourself what those things are. Now, JMT will help you take that to the next level and refine and define a little bit more clearly. But I would say that would be the first most important step for anybody before you call anybody. But Jacki, what would you say to that?
So the other things that, I would do, and this goes to the relationship and the validation that the partner is a partner versus a vendor or just a consulting firm, is really understanding, and having them demonstrate through whatever collateral they can bring, whether in conversations or in documentation, what is the methodology of how they provide the level of support and looking around the corner and making recommendations and really being the one that's thinking on your behalf. Everyone will tell you that they can do that, but you want to hear either from them showing you or from having spoken to others within their firm or references about, do they really do it? And because I think that's the biggest differentiator is too often we don't appreciate or understand those unwritten items. And so the scope of work has great language in there, but then you come in to do the implementation and something is different than your understanding. And, one of the things I say to organizations all the time is you want all of your partners that you're interviewing to step up in one way, shape, or form and commit that if they're giving you, for example, a fixed fee, that they're giving you a fixed fee, and how to make sure that that happens. Because it's very easy to say you have a fixed fee, but that scope of work, that's when and I was on this side of the table where I've gotten hit, but even today implementing newer systems in JMT where I've gotten change orders. So, these are differentiators, and responses to all of those will give you an indication on a relationship and a partnership or not with the implementation side.
And I might add that another thing is that, we so often, we encounter organizations who believe they need new software, for example, and they do very much need new software, and they've documented things very carefully, but they tend to only document the features and the functionality. They need to put as much or more thought into the partnership they're seeking and the level of service that they need to make, because look, there's great software out there and most of it can do all these things. Everybody can cut checks and everybody can do really great financial reports these days. There's lots of great software out there, but to document what you expect in your implementation partner would be a really helpful thing as well.
Right. Before I move on, does anybody else have anything they'd like to contribute, or is it okay to move on? All right. So this question is similar to what was just asked, but for each of you, if you could give one piece of advice to those starting this journey, what would it be?
Well, I gave mine. How about let's ask Jolie, because she talked a little bit about it earlier.
Yeah, I would pay lots of attention to the implementation and discovery process, and really take a look at your team. What does your team really need to make this happen? Really know your team and whatever they need, or in what your organization needs, seek that out in your implementer. And if your implementer is not, sort of customizing the implementation for you, then maybe they're not the right ones. I think that you know what you need, and so seek that out when you're looking at a partner.
We were on a call this morning. Dougie and I were on the same call because there was a recent client who decided to work with JMT, and we always we were doing what we call the handoff, where the implementation team takes it from me and moves forward. And so there's always a section about the people, the personalities, the human beings in that organization. And to your point, Julie, I think that's a great point, that software and all these things they're great, but there are people things that come up too. And so understanding your team, as you just said, is a huge part of it. If you have a group of people who are maybe more intimidated by technology on your staff or something like that, then that's going to be a different approach than if you have a bunch of 21-year-olds who know how to do everything on their phone with their thumbs. And so you really do, that understanding of your own people is a huge part of the success of a project.
All right. Those are the only questions that I have. So I will go ahead and let us wrap it up. Andy, I'm going to let you have the last word.
Well, as I said earlier, we really appreciate everyone's time, and we hope that you see the benefits of not only working with world-class software publishers, but also working with a partner who is truly working and committed to you, and not just to you to get live on some new system, but to support and partner with you for all the years ahead.
Wonderful. Well, we want to thank Jolie for her time today and the JMT team. We are so happy that you joined us. If you are interested in learning more about working with JMT, please email us at info@jmtconsulting.com, and we would love the opportunity to get to chat with you and see how we can assist you with your needs. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year,
Hi,
everyone.
Jolie,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Bye, everybody.